We have with us Wayne Garvie, who is the managing director of one of the major international production companies, All Three Media, and previous to that was a senior executive at the BBC, an entertainment group. Lord Nazir Ahmed is with us, as is Alan Yentob, who's been at the creative heart of the BBC for quite a while, who's the BBC creative director, but more than that, apart from being a very senior executive within the BBC, is also a program maker, as I'm sure you all know. And also with us is Darcus Howe, who is a campaigner, writer, and presenter on Channel 4 for many years.
People never break through that glass ceiling, actually, that people come across. So there's a sort of an institutional discrimination that kind of goes through where people from ethnic minorities and other people with disabilities and things don't ever really break through the mainstream.
I often think of the BBC as being an organisation that is basically based around the civil service structure that ran India for 100 years or so. And really, perhaps, actually, we should be looking elsewhere for our inspiration and looking at how the American music industry has found new generations of creative entrepreneurs. And I suppose at the top of my thinking now is how I, as someone who looks to work with creative entrepreneurs in Britain and America and around the world, actually new ways of working, new ways of working with that talent, which is really interesting for me.
It is quite clear, and I'm sure Wayne would say this, that the BBC's intentions are good, but there are very few broadcasters who have really got that absolutely in the DNA of the organisation. Having said that, there are a couple of interesting points. I mean, the point that Wayne makes, I would say, looking at this question of Britain and a kind of a BBC which reflects the broader Britain, in other words, where multiculturalism, where diversity are at the heart of it, that has been a tall order for the BBC over a long period of time, and sometimes the solutions have seemed to those tabloid papers that you talk about as being politically correct and counterproductive, but the BBC has felt they were essential and necessary. We live, however, in a world where social responsibility and social media, the world is changing. The digital technology is changing things. The opportunity to tell your story, to be heard in different ways is happening. So I think one route is through the BBC, and another is through this sort of really far more diverse and empowered groups of people who we can all have a dialogue with. And I think that is where the BBC will be differentiated. So I think creative entrepreneurialism is absolutely important. In fact, we need it in the BBC. Wayne has it. He left the BBC and went elsewhere. But more and more people are required in the organisation who can take an initiative, who can see talent, who don't feel that they have to sign lots of bits of paper before they recruit people. One area I do want to mention where I think there's just been organically a huge improvement, which is in finding creative talent on screen and on air. I think if you look at the last 5 years and look on air and see the number, and not just talking about journalism here, I'm talking about actors, writers, comedian performers, there are so many more talented Black and Asian performers who are finding their way onto the screen and who have sort of, through their own devices, thrust through, and the BBC now finds they're irresistible. They have to employ them because they need them. And I see myself finally as someone who comes from a sort of minority. My parents were immigrants. I find that's been important to me. It's I've been able to keep my difference and to nurture it, not necessarily in the same way that generation, my parents' generation did, but to see something valuable in these differentials. We live in a city here. Surely this city is far more exciting and dynamic as a consequence of what's happened in the past 30 years. So I think the question is just in a very large organisation that it should feel more and more like a smaller organisation, so that it can learn from the good things and then move on and pass them on.
I have known no time since then have we been plunged into such a degenerate media as today. Today I do the Guardian and the Daily Mail.
So you can get angry in the morning.
I always like to know what the enemy is saying. That male's sister had a front page saying, Darcus Howe says it was a good day, and a photograph of a police from another time on another demonstration with his hat and blood coming down his face. I'm not seeking your sympathy or to convince you. That is what they did. And slowly but surely, they became part of the special branch and part of the police investigation, and lied and lied. And I thought, where am I? As a boy, you couldn't say a sound in our house in a rural village in Trinidad, and all you would hear, and you knew, you better keep quiet. This is London calling.
But Darcus,
this is the voice. Don't interrupt. Don't. Because I'm on a roll. Blacks getting into the BBC as now. No time. You'd better forget it. The crisis comes when you get in there. You become somebody else.
That's a very interesting point that Darcus made.
Thank you, Bobby, for having me. I never knew I'd be sitting next to him here.
I can see, Darcus, you're sitting on the fence when it comes to the Daily Mail.
I see a lot of the problems that are happening currently in the music industry with journalism, so much that both industries have become fairly fragmented.
There used to be slots, as you know, from the community programs unit. Darcus knows about that and everything in those old days, when people were able to project quite strong views. But of course today, in this very volatile sort of social networked world that we live in, of blogs and otherwise, there are endless contentious views being thrown about. So the BBC is not so important anymore in that context.
How do you get more producers and managers from minority backgrounds in positions where they can make real decisions? Not that, that they should be bolshy and terribly militant, but not deracinated. How do you get more minority managers?
But there's a point you were making earlier, Darcus, is that, when you go in, and whether you're black or Asian or whatever else into the views, you don't pull the sort of the step ladder up behind you because you changed.
Yes.
You have to make sure that someone else can walk up behind you.
The DNA on several areas of this population. I have one, another immigrant has got another one, and it has been a tremendous struggle. I cannot accept we haven't moved by leaps and bounds. You know why? Otherwise I'd have wasted my life. I'd be telling you all I haven't done nothing but open my big mouth all over the place and nothing never happened. And I know things happen.
Gentleman there.
Are we still seeing a continuing culture of commissioning black and Asian writers to only write about stereotypical narratives? Recently, we saw Top Boy on Channel 4. A good piece of drama, but I've seen it loads of times before. I've seen it in Bullet Boy. I've seen it, so many times the same story being told over and over again. So do we still have a culture of commissioning? If we see a black or an Asian writer, that's all they can write about. There's a diverse range of stories out there that we seem to see and experience more so on the internet as opposed to on BBC and Channel 4. So is the internet becoming more relevant than terrestrial television? Whereas I feel that the BBC and Channel 4 has far greater responsibility to portray and engage with a far diverse range of relative stories. So it's really about looking at the relevance of terrestrial television versus what is becoming far more relevant stories online.
It's interesting that Top Boy was written by Ronan Bennett, not written by a black writer. So in a sense that contradicts what you're saying, and it was a big commitment. And, people have varying views about it, not so much the quality of it, but whether or not it took you any further. Perhaps you could say that is true. At the same time, I think that you do see in quite a lot of TV drama, you see Asians and Afro-Caribbeans, in parts which have got nothing to do with they're part of the popular diet of drama on television. In other words, they might be in a particular genre, detective or in spooks or those sorts of things. So I think there has been an improvement.
When you have the kind of themes addressed in something like Top Boy, right? I mean, inner city estates, a lot of young black men facing difficulties into work, drugs, all that kind of issues that Alan sort of said lots of programs have been made. That is reflecting a very big reality, isn't it? I mean, that is a part of life of a lot of you. But at the same time, you know, you don't see just a, you know, growing up film that just happens to be about, you know, a Moroccan kid and a Somali kid and whatever, which is also another...
Yeah, but I think that early in the process, you would get a kind of over-exuberance about making us be seen on the thing. And I just like to tell my daughter sometimes, when she gets exuberant about her Rasta mouse and stuff, I say, cool it. As you start to get and sweat when she talks. That what do you think? Somebody could, I said, take it easy. Take it easy and negotiate it. Negotiate your way through it. And that is the key moment that we are in now. That there is no way we're going back to no blacks on the TV. That ain't going to happen again. You understand what I'm making no threat, but maybe I am. That is not going to happen again. The problem now is, do we know who we're dealing with? I know a lot of teachers who had no idea who were the children sitting in front of them. So what you do is to stuff them with your prejudices, whether it's to treat them good or to bad, and they have no idea. You know, one Asian Cambridge BBC top newsman said to me once, there's no race, it's a matter of the cut of your jib. I said, let me tell you something, I have no jib. Forget me and jib. I was never in any navy. My grandfather had a fishing boat, and that's as far as jib went. Don't mess with me. I have no jib. There's no cut and no jib or anything like that. But still, once you get over, I mean, I remember when I first came here, I wouldn't even cross my mind to say we want this and that, because we're here, we're nervous now, and we've made leaps. There are others to make. And I don't like to hear the same old story all again. Look, this one, I mean, my mate here, he could never be on television when I first came here at all, with authority, telling you things that is a step forward. The next thing he should aim to be is to be head of the BBC. But we conquered some ground.
Big ground.
I've been watching the kind of changing nature of the television landscape for the last 30 years or so, and I just wanted to pick up on a point that Alan Yentob made. I think while I agree with you that there is a lot more on-screen portrayal of black and Asian faces in dramas and things, and something like Spooks has been quite interesting in terms of characters, I do have to disagree with you as far as the writers are concerned. I think there has been very little effort made to nurture black and Asian writing within that TV landscape. I know you have a writer's room, and I see Kate Rowland all over the place.
I think the writers, it would be quite interesting to know, Alan, how, I mean, Kate's done great work on the writer's room, but yeah, traditionally, there's a great history of writers coming through the soap factories, be it Coronation Street, Hollyoaks, Brookside at Lyme, or the BBC at EastEnders. And I know for a fact John York at EastEnders is very concerned about diversity, and I think has made efforts to get writers in, because absolutely that's right. I don't think that, by the way, there's no one's saying that those biopics, it's again about finding the right subject that a commissioner is going to buy into.
Cool. I mean, John York is the figure in the BBC who we most look to foster diversity and new talent. And he's been rather brilliant at it, I have to say, over the last year. So the point that you raise is an interesting one, though, and I will talk to him about, if you email me, I'll make sure you can have a conversation with him about it.